YouTube viewers, we encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. We love the interaction, and the more interaction we get from you, the better. On today's show, JD Vance is talking logic. Yankees and Eagles radio voice Ricky Ricardo joins me to discuss the Yankees offseason and the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles. But we begin today with Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, addressing a change to the game of basketball that he says that he himself personally wouldn't mind seeing. And no, it's not related to three-pointers. Let's go to the videotape.
Something else that I'm a fan of, and I'm probably in a minority, as we get more involved in global basketball, the NBA is the only league that plays 48 minutes. And I am a fan of 4 10-minute quarters. I'm not sure that many others are. I mean, putting aside what it means for records and things like that, you know, I think that a 2-hour format for a game is more consistent with sort of modern television habits. I don't think people in arenas aren't asking us to shorten the game, but I think as a television program, being 2 hours, that's Olympic basketball is 2 hours. You know, college basketball, of course, is
but
is
if
40
you
minutes.
like it, I'd say it has kind of a little bit of a push there.
Yeah, but it's such a dramatic change to the game. I mean, I think something like that would have to be talked more about over time. I mean, incidentally,
But the pitch clock was dramatic, Commissioner.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I'm a fan of what baseball did. I'm a baseball fan, and I think some of those changes have really increased sort of the engagement, the entertainment value of the game.
So there you have it. The NBA commissioner speaking to Dan Patrick saying that 48 minutes, it just might be too goddamn much. Maybe the NBA needs to go to 4 10-minute quarters, make it a 40-minute game. Nobody else is out there playing 48 minutes. Certainly not at the collegiate level and not internationally either. And look, it doesn't directly address three-pointers, but if my back-of-the-envelope math is correct, it's going to drop three-point attempts by about 17% as well. So look at that. He sort of put a Band-Aid on the three-point crisis at the same time. Look, 2 hours, all I know is that the last 3 minutes of an NBA game feels like an hour and 15 minutes of it. You breeze through the first 3 quarters. It's that fourth quarter with all the timeouts and everything. It's an eternity. So I don't know. What do you think of it? There's a lot of things that if we were starting over tomorrow, we might do differently than the way that we do them today. 48 minutes, yeah, that is excessive. But at the same time, all of your historical records are based on 48 minutes. Is that going to make it more difficult for people to challenge records? Are records suddenly going to be unbreakable because those guys were playing a game that was almost 20% longer in duration? Is it going to make depth of your team less important because you've only got 40 minutes to fill? If you got a starter that plays 36, 37 minutes, well, that's only 3 minutes that you need to have somebody out there on the court in his place rather than an entire quarter of basketball. So there's a lot of ripple effects here that are going to happen, but it's good to see that Adam Silver is strategizing what he thinks is best for the NBA, making some time to do that in between putting together his elaborate plans to kill Superman. Adam Silver. I believe this tweet was from back during the COVID era. Adam Silver saying, well, Superman. At last we meet again. Prepare to die in front of my assembly of virtual fans. It's a lot of work to try to figure out how you're going to kill Superman, how you're going to shorten games, how you're going to deal with the three-point issue. We've talked on this program a number of times about how do you deal with the fact that over 40% of the shots taken in the NBA are three-pointers now. It is not sustainable. It is not quality viewing. The athleticism in the league is better than ever. I'll be the first to concede it. Compared to the era that's my favorite era, the 80s, the players are definitely more athletic now, but the game is less interesting. And that ultimately is a bigger problem. I would rather watch athletes that aren't quite at the level of the 2025 NBA play a more beautiful version of basketball. They got to get on that, saying less basketball is the solution. Yeah, maybe a 40-minute game isn't a bad idea, but Adam Silver, I think you have a much bigger issue trying to figure out what the style of play on court is going to be, no matter what those minutes are, because you can cut it to 40 minutes, but 40 minutes of garbage is still garbage. Stephen A., and speaking of garbage, would be an unkind segue here, because I feel badly for Bronny James. I really do. As badly as you can feel for a millionaire kid of a father who is one of the greatest players to ever play the game, the most famous basketball player on the planet, a kid who got drafted in the second round even though he had no business getting drafted, a kid who even more egregiously received guaranteed money as a late second round draft pick, which never would have happened if he wasn't LeBron's kid, a kid who basically was handed on a silver platter getting to play in the NBA, even for one game, because certainly at this point in his young life, nothing he's done has merited playing in the NBA. And so a lot of criticism has come down on LeBron, but also on Bronny, because he's the one who is out there fulfilling the ambitions and the dreams of his father. And Stephen A. Smith has seen just about enough. Roll tape.
I am pleading with LeBron James as a father. Stop this. Stop this. We all know that Bronny James is in the NBA because of his dad. He has scored 4 points. He is shooting 1 of 16 from the field, 0 for 7 from three-point range. How are you doing him favors? We know that he's not ready yet. And I'm saying this with compassion. I'm asking the greatest player in the game, one of the top 2 players in the history of basketball, an ambassador for this game, the face of the league, a 4-time champion, a guy that's gone to 10 NBA finals, one of the greatest we have ever or will ever see, who is a basketball savant. You know better than me, better than Doggy, better than JJ Redick, better than Rob Pelinka, better than any basketball analysis or analyst that exists. You know what these numbers mean.
What was best for Bronny James? Well, we can debate that. I have said he should have stayed in college for a while longer. He could have used more than 1 additional season of college, at least 2. Probably should have played it all the way out through his senior year. They've got him in the G League. He's putting up some numbers in the G League, but if you really look at his stats, his shooting percentage is bad. He is not a three-point shooter at all in this era where we got centers that are out there filling it up from three-point range. Bronny is just overmatched at this point, and he should be allowed to develop in the G League because that's the only choice he really has now without the scrutiny of folks like Stephen A. and myself getting on him because J.J. Redick has him out there playing 15 minutes where he scores no points, turns the ball over 3 times, and is exposed as just simply not being an NBA player. It's not fair to the kid, but I'm sure he doesn't want to disappoint his father. So I feel for him. You got your dad pushing you into this. You don't want to let your dad down. None of us do. Part of the reason that I find the old St. Louis Cardinals, then Phoenix Cardinals, then Arizona Cardinals. We can go all the way back to them being the Chicago Cardinals for that point, I guess. But there's Jim Hart back in the St. Louis era. And, they updated the helmets. Every team, the Seahawks did the same thing. You had the great original Seahawks helmet where he just looked sleepy and like he needed a cup of coffee, but then they made him angry. The Cardinals did the same thing with the Cardinal. And I think the modern angry Cardinal logo, while it's supposed to be fearsome, I think the original disappointed father Cardinal was actually worse because you knew you'd let him down. That's probably the look that Bronny is afraid that he's going to get from LeBron when he comes in after getting skunked on the scoreboard in another Lakers game. Tough spot to put a kid in, if you ask me. And I'll go now to the international streaming star who joins me from Nashville, Tennessee. He is, of course, Ronnie T-shirts. And Ronnie, Adam Silver, offering some suggestion to what he thinks would make the NBA product better, even though it's not addressing the core question that you, me, Bob Ryan, and a lot of other people have been asking. What do you think? The NBA cutting back from 48 minutes down to 40.
I mean, they could make it 20 minutes and I still wouldn't watch because of something you alluded to. And I think it's true with college basketball too. I mean, there's a lot of reasons I don't like college basketball anymore, but I just find the end of basketball games to just be just literal torture, Ricky. Like, I don't know how you stop it. Like, do you decrease the number of timeouts that are allowed? Do you decrease how you're allowed to call timeouts in succession with the other team? I don't know what you can do, but you were exaggerating a little bit when you said it's an hour and 15 minutes, but it actually feels like an hour and 15 minutes. And I think that's probably the biggest concern that I have as somebody that likes to watch sports is the end of the games they're torture, Ricky.
Interminable.
Yeah.
It's just interminable. Hard to
So
to
even
get-
at 40 minutes, if you're still doing the last 5 minutes the same way, I still don't want to watch it.
Fewer timeouts. Would the world be a worse place if the teams got less timeouts? How many times do you need to fucking huddle up? It's just not good for viewing.
No.
And so I think, Bob Dylan, years ago, he started making longer songs than the traditional pop form. And, when I was in grad school, Ron, I did my thesis on pop music and the length of songs and the subject matter of songs. And Dylan changed all of that really in the 60s. And they were talking to him about one of his very long songs. And he said, it's not so much how long a song is, but it shouldn't feel long.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about, hey, NFL games should be less than 2 hours. None of us feel that way because when we watch an NFL game or a college football game, we're entertained.
Yep.
So baseball, it was a different situation as well, right? All these guys stepping out of the box, pitchers taking forever out there on the mound to get set to deliver. And the length of games just crept up and crept up and crept up over time to the point that you couldn't even imagine that they could play a game in under 3 hours. And the clock changed that. So maybe the NBA needs to worry more about the pace of the game and the style of the game rather than sort of a artificial solution of making the game shorter. Because you're not going after really what logically you should be trying to address. Maybe on the subject of logic, we should put J.D. Vance in charge of solving the NBA's issues. Because every time I hear J.D. Vance speak these days, I'm impressed by just the raw common sense of what he has to say. And I want to go to some tape of J.D. Vance now, just out there, as you said the other day, Ron, being the smartest guy in the room.
But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country. And then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership. And President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first. In the same way that the British Prime Minister should care about Brits and the French should care about the French, we have an American president who cares primarily about Americans, and that's a very welcome change.
What is President Xi doing? What is Vladimir Putin
He's looking
doing?
after the Chinese. Putin is looking after the Russians. They're entitled to do that. Thank God we now have an American president who's looking after the citizens of his own country.
We need to normalize that viewpoint. People need to understand that having common sense standards and setting healthy boundaries does not make you an asshole. You can draw parallels between decisions that the Trump administration is making currently for this country and decisions that people might face in their personal relationships. Sometimes people in dysfunctional relationships, they make excuses for their partner when their partner is behaving poorly. Well, he's treating me badly because he was treated badly at some point in his life, or he's treating me badly because of some issues that he has. And that may be so, but that still is not a blank check to treat you badly. And people become codependent sometimes in these situations where they look at really the offender as the victim. And as somebody who spent a huge chunk of my adult life as a liberal, I am realizing that in midlife, I am confronted. One of the things that I think makes it difficult for people on the left to open themselves up to more moderate center right, forget about air quotes far right viewpoints, is they have gotten into this mentality where they feel that the identification with the supposed victim is more important than the virtue of the question at hand, right? In any personal relationship, you have to set boundaries. If you listen to any psychologist, any good counselor is going to tell you, you have to set boundaries for yourself. Because if you don't do that, you are just going to spend your life trying to please and help other people that are, frankly, maybe harming you, right? And so the situation that we see here in this country is that you have to prioritize things. It doesn't mean when you lock your doors at night, that doesn't mean that you hate the outside world. That doesn't mean that you have venom in your heart for anybody. It means that you're prioritizing you and your family first. It doesn't mean that you lack compassion. It doesn't mean that you lack sympathy. It means that the first thing that you're doing is taking care of you and yours. And so, look, I have sympathy for people who want to seek a better life in a different country. And it's somebody who's coming from an impoverished place and they see an opportunity to come and live a better quality of life in America. I certainly understand that. And I understand that many of the people who come to America illegally are contributing members to our society. But when you see people who come here illegally and then they're committing crimes, I think that's a clear situation where you got to go. If I went to another country, if you went to another country and you went there illegally, and then when you got there, you started breaking the law, are you the hero in that story? Or are you somebody who has interloped into a different place and now you're a bad actor once you've gotten there? Okay, so basic common sense. It doesn't make you a bad person to prioritize certain things first. On an individual level, that's yourself, your family, your kids, your spouse. But at the country level, we have to have boundaries too. And the first priority, without being an asshole to anybody, is to protect the American citizens. Did you see Bill Belichick had some really interesting comments the other day? They were asking him about his success as a coach. This is one of the more human moments for Bill Belichick. Maybe this is what his 23-year-old girlfriend sees in him, Ron. Let's roll the videotape. Bill Belichick talking about his success and how success depends as a coach on your players.
Players win games. You can't win games without good players.
I don't care who the coach is. It's impossible. You can't win without good players. You know, I found out when I had Taylor and Banks and Harry Carson, Pepper Johnson, Jim Burt, Everson Walls, all those guys of the Giants. And same thing, you know, when we got good at Cleveland and then at New England. I mean, it's, you know, it's Brady, it's McGinnis, it's Vrabel, it's Brewski, it's Corey Dillon, it's Randy Moss, Troy Brown, Lawyer Malloy, Ty Law, Rodney Harrison. Those are the guys that won the games. Man, I didn't make any tackles. I didn't make any kicks. That was Vinatieri that made that kick in 4 inches of snow. You got to have good players. And as a coach, you want to give your players a chance to win. You want to put them in a position where if they go out there and play well, they'll have a chance to win. That's what Coach Parcells taught me is there's always a way to win. You just got to figure out what it is, and you have to give the players a chance.
They don't name it the Star Trophy. It's named the Lombardi Trophy.
Maybe they should name it the Brady Trophy. He won 7 of them.
Maybe they should name it the Brady Trophy. He says, Ron, look, we can talk about the greatest coaches in any sport, and they all had unbelievable players. Isn't it funny how that works? If it's the NBA, we say, well, Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, any of these guys, you look at the talent they had. Phil, Michael, Pippen, Kobe, Shaq, Red Auerbach, Russell, Havlicek, Cousy, Sam Jones, all of these guys, right? No matter what sport it is, you got to have great players. And I'm about to welcome to the program now a man who knows something about great players. Another Ricky, finally, joins me on this show, Ricky Ricardo. Good morning, Ricky.
Morning to you, Ricky. Pleasure here and glad to be with you.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. Now, man, you know, you were just in the World Series here with the Yankees a few months ago. Now you're set for the Super Bowl. You've been calling some great action here with both of these franchises. Ricky, I want to get into talking about the Yankees with you a little bit as we go on, but let's start with the lead. The Philadelphia Eagles are New Orleans bound. We've got a rematch of Super Bowl 57 coming up against these Kansas City Chiefs. Ricky, what's different in the 2 years that have elapsed between that 38-35 outstanding game that we saw a couple of years ago?
Well, from the Eagle point of view, the defense, I think, is much stronger this time around. Vic Fangio's system has worked perfectly with the talent. Howie Roseman's draft this year with Quinyon Mitchell, a rookie at corner who's become a shutdown type of guy. Cooper DeJean at safety. Both of them are in the running now for one of the NFL honors for being Defensive Rookie of the Year. So I think on the defensive side, the Eagles are much better prepared to handle Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and everything that Andy Reid, whom we know very, very well, obviously from years with the Eagles. What Andy has up his sleeve for us, I think Fangio's defense is much better equipped to handle as compared to 2 years ago. And then on the offense, simply Jalen Hurts with some more experience. Remember, Hurts had a pretty good game 2 years ago out in Arizona, but he did have a key turnover that turned into 7 points for the Chiefs in that game. We could all say if he doesn't have that fumble that causes that 7 points, maybe the Eagles win that game. They were ahead by 10 at halftime, let's not forget. But I think the Eagles, number one, experience-wise, I think Nick Sirianni, 2 years later, has got a lot more savvy in him coming into this as a head coach. And I think this defense is much better equipped to handle whatever the Kansas City Chiefs may throw at us on the field in New Orleans.
And you don't even mention Saquon Barkley, which,
wow.
Wow.
You know, yeah. I mean, when you talk about the addition of Saquon Barkley, you know, that is the elephant in the room, obviously. Now, the Eagles had a decent running attack a couple of years ago, but this offensive line has been consistent year after year after year. But now Saquon Barkley, and I was gonna bring him up if you asked me what would be the difference in this game, then Saquon Barkley can put this team on his shoulders, as he has done for the majority of this season, has taken the pressure off of Jalen Hurts, which has limited Hurts' turnovers because he knows he doesn't have to be Superman every game. If things are going okay, just hand the ball to Saquon. We're going to kill the clock. We're going to win time of possession. And Barkley is going to probably peel off a couple of big runs and maybe even score a couple of touchdowns from 50, 60, 70 yards out as he has on so many occasions this year. So it takes the pressure off of everybody on the offensive side. But Saquon Barkley, to me, and Ricky, I don't know how you feel about this. The MVP, and look, in football awards, okay, they don't mean as much maybe as they do in baseball, but it's become a quarterback award. So when you talk about Josh Allen, the argument was, is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Sam Darnold for the year he had in Minnesota? I dare say Saquon Barkley was as valuable, quote unquote, to his team or more than any of the quarterbacks that are up for this vote for MVP. But no, obviously, Saquon Barkley, when you talk about the biggest addition to this team as compared to 2 years ago, number 26 has just been outstanding, much to the chagrin of my Giant fans.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, what a season. 2,005 yards rushing. And then we look at what he's done in the playoffs. He had 119 yards against the Packers, 205 against the Rams, including 62 and 78-yard touchdown runs, and then 118 last week, 3 touchdowns, including a 60-yard run. As you said, Ricky, this is a guy who anytime he gets his hands on the football could take it to the house. And everybody in the stadium, more importantly than that, you're either holding your breath if you're cheering for the other team, or you're expecting that literally anything could happen. He really moves the needle like few running backs that we've ever seen, really, to be honest, in the history of football. I think he's up there with the all-time greats at this point.
Look, I go back. I'm old enough to have watched O.J. Simpson in his prime, Tony Dorsett in his prime, guys like that, the Curtis Martins, the Eric Dickersons of the world. But Saquon Barkley behind this Eagles offensive line, Ricky, he doesn't even see contact for 10, 12, 15 yards down the field when he goes past the point of attack at the line of scrimmage. It's amazing what the Eagle offensive line has been able to do for him, and he to have the vision to get right through those big holes that those big muckers have been opening these holes, and he's been taking full advantage of it. It has really, really crystallized. Remember, the Eagles were 2-2 and slipping back in October when they had the bye week. First week in October, the baseball playoffs hadn't even started yet. The Eagles had their bye week. They came off the bye week with a kind of performance against the Cleveland Browns in Philadelphia, won that game. Saquon only had about 40 yards in that game. It was a very poor performance. But something clicked. And after that, they peeled off another 9 straight. They had 10 straight wins. Finally had the loss to the Commanders late in the season in a game where Jalen Hurts got injured and wasn't able to finish. And Gardner Johnson, their safety, was tossed from the game for a couple of personal fouls. And the Commanders came back and won the game. But now, look, they turned around in the rubber match against Washington. Remember, the Commanders had an 18-play drive to start the game. Went down the field, only were able to come up with 3 points. And then you answer on the first play with Saquon's 60-yard touchdown run. You could have turned your TV set off right there.
Yeah, demoralizing.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of how they took the air out of the Buccaneers, was just, grinding down the field. And, man, when you've got a guy like that, one play, now we're ahead 7-3, all that work that you did, and you're behind, you're right. It's kind of like almost, you're right, flick off the TV. Ricky, when you look at these Chiefs, this is their 5th trip to the Super Bowl in 6 seasons. Obviously, they're a dynasty, win or lose in this Super Bowl. They're a dynasty that's going to be remembered for a very long time, and rightfully so. But this is a 15-2 team. The last loss, I think we can discount because they weren't playing to win. It was the last game of the season. They've really only had one real loss, but they've played a lot of close games. They have seemed pretty vulnerable for a 3 championship dynasty that only has 1 competitive loss this year. When you look at where the Chiefs are now relative to where they've been the past 4 or 5 seasons up until now, do you think that this team is more vulnerable perhaps than the team that you guys faced a couple of years ago?
Well, they're either a little more vulnerable or, and this is the way I choose to look at them coming up for this game, probably at their most dangerous, because they know they had a well, kind of a off and on, kind of a kind of regular season. You didn't see the best of Kelsey during the season. They had a lot of injuries at wide receiver. As you mentioned, there were a lot of close games, a lot of big calls that all went their way. So there was a lot of things that kind of made them tread water, but winning week after week after week. They did just enough to win. Now, you get to this point, they beat the Texans. They were able to come out with the win against the Buffalo Bills, albeit with another couple of controversial calls. But Andy Reid, with time to prepare, it almost reminds me of Joe Paterno years ago, those Penn State teams in big bowl games. They said, if you give Paterno 3-4 weeks, remember that was that long between the end of the college season and the bowl games. And everyone used to say, if you give Paterno 2, 3, 4 weeks to prepare, he's going to outcoach whoever the opponent is and they're going to win. You give Andy Reid the extra week or Steve Spagnuolo the extra week, they're going to come up with something interesting, maybe something new that you haven't seen this year. So, yes, are they vulnerable? That's what it shows during the season, but these guys are going for a three-peat. I'm not leaning on any vulnerability. I think right now they're kind of a cage, they're almost like an injured animal who's probably more dangerous now because they look vulnerable during the regular season. I think this is the time where maybe they're looking at it as to crank it up and put it all back together for this one big game and get that three-peat. So if I'm the Eagles, I've got to look at this like we're going to face the optimum Kansas City Chiefs, not a team that maybe struggled to get to 15-2, as strange as that sounds. This is a team that's on a mission to win their third Super Bowl. The Eagles have got to play their best football on Sunday the 9th to put an end to this and make a lot of New England Patriot and other franchises very, very happy, as no other team has ever gotten to 3 championships in a row.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ricky. The Chiefs at this juncture, January and February, they look at that as their time.
Yep, exactly.
And, I think you make a great point there. Well, as I said at the outset, I mean, you're a busy guy, not just the radio voice for the Eagles, but for the New York Yankees as well. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about this offseason. Obviously, just a few months ago, you guys went to the World Series, came up short against the LA Dodgers. The Dodgers have certainly been busy, Ricky. This offseason, they're spending tons of money and a lot of criticism raining down. People saying, well, something needs to be done about this. When does it go too far? Obviously, the Yankees are no strangers to making big splashes in the free agent market. But this offseason, the biggest splash was Juan Soto going from the Bronx to Queens. What do you make of this offseason? First of all, the Dodgers and everything that they're doing. And then what do you think of the moves that the Yankees have, or as the case may be, haven't made so far during the offseason?
All right, I'll compare these Dodgers to the George Steinbrenner era Yankees, where everyone said they're doing things that no one else is able to do. Somebody's got to put a stop to this. And everybody had a negative kind of outlook on this. I don't see it that way. As long as the Dodgers are operating within the rules, they're operating within the rules. Now, if their balance sheet 10, 20 years from now, with all the deferred money that they've put in these contracts, if their balance sheet going on down the line, it takes a dip, so be it. That's their problem. But as long as they're within the rules, as George Steinbrenner played within the rules during his big run, taking advantage of free agency, taking advantage of the situation where the local money was all his and there was no revenue sharing and things like that, then I don't have an issue with what the Dodgers are doing. You get hot in the postseason and somebody could knock the Dodgers off. It could be in the National League. It could be San Diego. It could be Philadelphia. It could be the Atlanta Braves. Who knows if the Mets, if they got some pitching. But what I'm trying to say is, look, they're doing it one particular way. Their payroll may be $100 million more than the next highest team in baseball. Rob Manfred is signing off on it, then I've got to sign off on it. Now, the Yankee offseason has been a little bit different. They went above and beyond, in my opinion, to try to bring back Juan Soto. At no point, Ricky, last year, and I was with Soto every day, every game, as happy as he was to be in pinstripes in the Bronx, I always thought that he had these blinders on and looked at the season as a complete business tool. He was putting together his best season to be able to maximize his free agency, and obviously it worked. He never let himself, this is just my view, I don't think he ever let himself fall in love, per se, with the pinstripes. I think he always had free agency in mind. That was the long-term goal, and he didn't let himself get enamored to the point where, you know, he would leave money on the table to stay with the Yankees. And proof be it that he took the extra however many million to cross over the RFK Triborough Bridge, go past LaGuardia Airport, and go over to Citi Field. Now, does the investment work for the Mets? It works public relations-wise because the Mets have finally outdone the big brother Yankees at something in their 60-odd year period that they've existed. They've never outdone the Yankees in anything. So they finally got one up on the Yankees by signing Soto and taking him away. Now, with the Yankee moves, the Goldschmidt, the Max Fried signing, the additions that the Yankees have made at Bellinger, I think the Yankees are a better team overall than the Mets. So if the goal, as Herm Edwards used to say, you play to win the game, if we're playing to win the game and win a World Series, I'm banking on the Yankees getting to a World Series before the Mets with Soto get to a World Series. I think in a weird sort of way, the way it all worked out, the Yankees showed their fans that they were willing to go way, way beyond to try to bring Soto back. The Mets were not going to get outbid. Didn't matter. You know, Cohen would have gone to who knows what if the bidding would have continued. But the Yankees have done enough to improve their club to ultimately hold up a trophy while the Mets have Juan Soto on their side of the river.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I think the Yankees, you know, one player, and again, the Mets win for now, but $765 million, 15 years. Let's see how Juan Soto plays over that period of time, right? It's only a victory if Juan Soto goes over there and delivers sustained production over the next decade, really. Ricky, before you go, I'm going to pivot here. I'm going to make a big pivot. What was Rick James really like? That's what I want to know. I did my research on you, sir, and I know that you knew Rick James. Could you just tell the audience just a little bit how you knew Rick James? Because I read that and I was like, my gosh, there's no way I'm going to let Ricky get out of here today without asking about that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Rick James, and just to put things in context, before I became a sportscaster, for the first 25, 30 odd years of my career, let's see, I started in 1982 in New York. So about the first 22 years of my radio career, I was in music and not sports. I was an on-air personality, the classic quote unquote DJ. But during a period of time where the DJs really had some power, we had some juice, especially in New York City, and the station I was at, which was always number one, we played your record was going to go gold, platinum, your tours were going to sell out. You know, it was a very important time where, you know, programmers weren't as influential as they are now. The individual DJ was a star, and we had a lineup of big names during that time period. So Rick James, what happened was at a concert, my program director, Frankie Crocker, was one of the biggest names in New York radio at the time, contractually was not allowed to introduce Rick James on stage at the Meadowlands at a big concert because he had another appearance. So he asked me to do it. I brought Rick James on, 70,000 people. We became close. We became friends. And I kind of, I was in my early 20s. I became his tour MC for about 6 straight years. Now, we could do a whole 2-3 hour show, Ricky, on stories. You know, we'd have to put up maybe a parental guidance or a rated R or something if I were able to get into details. But he wrote a book called Confessions of a Super Freak, and he was not exaggerating. So everything you've heard is probably true. The Charlie Murphy stories with Prince and Rick and the whole. I'll give you one quick one. Okay. And this is the God's honest truth. Rick James and I got arrested in Memphis, Tennessee for kicking a duck. So you will ask me, what the heck are you talking about? Are you familiar, Ricky, with the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee?
I'm not.
Peabody Hotel, the Peabody 5-star hotel, the Peabody is a prized duck. That's the logo, the symbol of the hotel. Now, these ducks, they live like kings. They have their pond, and they get to walk with police escorts twice a day to go into a pond. They swim a little bit, do their business, and then they're escorted by the police again on a red carpet, and they would go back up to their suite in the hotel, this group of prized ducks. Well, Rick James one night wanted some more party goods, let's say, and wanted to hit the street looking for a liquor store 3, 4 in the morning when these ducks were coming down red carpet to go into the pond. Now you have to stop and let the ducks cross before you can cross the street. Rick wanted a beer so bad, he said, oh, to heck with this. He kicked one of the ducks. The ducks go flying. Next thing I know, we're both in handcuffs. We're down at the Memphis Police Department. So in my book that I'll write someday, I can honestly say, well, obviously we were released a few minutes later, but we both got pinched for kicking a duck in Memphis, Tennessee.
That's it. I have never been happier that I chose to ask a question than the question that I just asked you about Rick James. Because that was the highlight of the show, probably for the rest of the week, no matter what happens. Ricky, listen, thank you so much, man. I could sit here and talk baseball and football and Rick James with you all day long. I know you got a lot going on right now. I appreciate you making time for me. Thank you so much.
Well, Ricky, it's been a pleasure. Remember, I do games in English, Spanish, and I speak Outcast. Okay? And I speak OutKick. I'm saying Outcast. I speak OutKick. All right?
Too.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. All right. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. Got to have you back on again sometime. I was going to say in the off season, you don't have much of an off season though, man.
No, the Super Bowl is on the 9th. Pitchers and catchers report on Tuesday the 11th. So if we have a parade,
well, enjoy the 10th. Yeah,
if we have a parade, it'll probably be on the 12th, and I'll probably miss, pitchers and catchers reporting. But that's okay because Aaron Boone, the manager, is an Eagle fan too.
Okay, well, think about in the little free time that you do have, think about how that memoir is going to be put together. Because based on that story alone, I think the memoir needs to happen, Ricky.
Well, I'll come back and we'll talk all about all the stories here on your show whenever you want.
All right, you're on, my friend. Good luck in the Super Bowl. I think a lot of America is with the Eagles this year. So
thank you. I hope so.
I'm with you. I'm rooting the Eagles. All right, thank you, Ricky. Ricky Ricardo.
Hey, OutKick fans on YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and make your way over to OutKick.com where you can watch the full episode.